Coming.
When you select U.S. holidays on whatever is your digital calendar of choice, the anchor holidays of Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, and Thanksgiving always populate the calendar, and they should. But there are a slew of holidays that also come along for the ride, such as Tax Day, Groundhog Day, April Fool's Day, just to name a few. I've even attempted to remove some of these extraneous holidays, but I'm always soundly rejected with a stern warning from my calendar app. So because of the way I'm wired, the more I receive these warnings, the more I began to think of the idea of a new calendar with new holidays. May not be such a bad idea. I'm talking about holidays that form a new kind of calendar that will easily sway the hearts and minds, that will focus more of their eyeballs on the screens, and their pocketbooks will naturally follow. I'm thinking from the perspective of a new nationally observed calendar based purely on our season of sports. Whenever there's a major political event transpiring in the world, we'll often hear the expression hearts and minds. That expression is often used as an emotional and an intellectual appeal leveraged at swaying groups of people. And as important as it is for us to all be aware of the politics of world events, it's also often said that politics are downstream from culture. But fortunately, and definitely unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the past several decades, pop culture has been the dominant sector within all of the greater culture. And within pop culture, TV shows, motion pictures, and now digital content dominate. They are the dominant forces that drive everything. And there's no greater force in all of pop culture than live sports content that always seems to make an impressive entrance every year at the beginning into men's college basketball's March Madness, and then culminating as we actually experienced recently with absolutely ridiculous ratings heights each year with the NFL's presentation of the Super Bowl. 100 plus million viewers without fail year after year. In order to be great at something, you have to take risks. There's no way around it. So I believe that one of the primary reasons scripted TV shows, as well as non-scripted TV shows for that matter, have seen sharp declines in the past decades or so is that overall, and of course there are exceptions to every rule in life, overall the predictability of these shows simply can't overcome the power of live programming, in particular live sports. The highest rated scripted shows today generally average somewhere between 5 and 7 million viewers per episode. And the majority of the traditionally styled shows, such as some of these scripted comedy shows on the networks with laugh tracks and things of that nature, they're typically half of that number. So when you think about it from this perspective, men's college basketball's March Madness coming up here, which I would place at the beginning of this new nationally observed calendar. It'll begin its 84th annual tournament beginning on March 14th of this year, with its championship game culminating a few weeks later on Monday, April 3rd. Every year, audiences are absolutely captivated by storyline after storyline for those 3 weekends of March Madness. It's one of the most interesting and fascinating things on television. You can't take your eyes off of most of it. Storylines such as the 15th seed making it to the Elite Eight, a player coming from a challenging circumstance in order to shine on this massive national stage, potentially elevating the course of his life. Or a number 8 seed such as North Carolina State back in the 80s, as far back as the 80s, with the fearless Jim Valvano leading that team. I love that guy's energy to the championship game and a win. So just about everything involved with this tournament is almost impossible to predict. I think that's the biggest thing that keeps people's eyeballs to live sporting events. And on average, the past several years, the number of viewers range on average about 10 million viewers for each of the stages of March Madness. We're talking about the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the championship rounds. People can't get enough of it. But the bottom line is, because people can't get enough of it, that many eyeballs are glued to the screen. This sends the networks, all of the television networks, revenue generation into the stratosphere. This is why I would actually place March Madness as the official launch of the new nationally observed calendar based purely on sports. That kind of live programming, often anchored by decades and even in certain cases more than a century-old rivalry, in a lot of cases. It's the primary reason television events based on sports, such as March Madness through the Super Bowl, absolutely dominates hearts and minds, as pocketbooks will follow. I've often had discussions with friends who thoroughly enjoy scripted content, whether movies, TV shows, no matter the platform, broadcast TV, premium service, subscription services, or traditionally going to the movies. And for some strange reason, these conversations tend to ramp up in volume a whole lot faster and much more aggressive in tone than is probably warranted. I'd say 9 times out of 10, I'm the I'm the instigator of that aggressive tone, but it's fun. But every time I do have these conversations, I have to make sure that I say over and over again that I've always been and I always will be a huge fan of scripted content such as Game of Thrones, Justified, The Wire, just to name a few. All the MCU and DCU pieces of content, as well as anything Star Wars. But recently, actually in the past year or so, the most viewed scripted shows over the past few years, a show in particular by the name of Yellowstone. We can use Yellowstone here. Yellowstone had a season finale recently in the industry trade publication. They ran story after story over the incredible achievement of a little more than 9 million viewers for the final episode of that season. Kudos to them, and I truly mean that because I know that it takes a lot of talented people, a lot of time to create that kind of magic for the screen. But let's give it a little bit more context as far as the viewing public may be concerned. In the past decade, shows that have taken chances tend to generate higher than normal audiences, such as Breaking Bad. It has series-ending episode with 10 million viewers. That's huge for a cable show. And of course, the big daddy of them all, Game of Thrones. I think it was the end of season 8. It actually recorded a little under 20 million viewers for the season 8 finale. The unfortunate part is that caliber of scripted content is few and far between. Let's go to the live stuff, as I mentioned before, but let's even talk about the live granddaddy of all the award shows, the Oscars. So the Oscars, which is specifically designed to showcase the greatest scripted content in the world of motion pictures, has been greatly floundering the past few decades, the past decade in particular. I don't know if it'll ever recover, even with craziness like the slap heard around the world with Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. I understand some points of views that reflexively state that the 2021 and the 2022 Oscars should carry asterisks as the result of the pandemic's wake. There's a lot of merit to that, and I don't disagree with that necessarily. There is some merit to that until numbers from the Super Bowl, the same years and the same time of year are compared. Let's first use a ratings organization that I think everyone can say is legit. Nielsen. Nielsen's a legendary ratings reporting service, and they stated just a couple of years ago there are approximately 121 million TV homes in the U.S. as of 2021. So that's a foundation from which the same potential audience for both live telecast can be accessed. So, and I'm not saying that every Super Bowl, every household watched the Super Bowl, but in 2021, the Oscars had approximately 10 million viewers. Remember, same time of year as the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl clocked in 96 million viewers. In 2022, the Oscars clocked in 16 million viewers, while the Super Bowl earned 112 million viewers. And prior to 2021's 10 million viewers, the audience for the Oscars had never fallen below 20 million viewers. And even though 2022 improved at 16 million viewers, which may seem like a lot, and a lot of improvement over 2021 Oscars, it still makes it the second least watched Oscars since Nielsen began tracking the viewers for the Oscar telecast back in the mid 1970s. So to show you how much the Oscars have fallen the past 20-25 years, I'd say. In 1998, the Oscars is where Titanic won for Best Picture. It clocked in at 55 plus million people. That was the most ever for the nearly century-old telecast of the Oscars. So now that March Madness launches each new calendar year with a bang, the NBA playoffs, they take that baton and they further embolden wagers around the world until they pass the baton to MLB's Boys of Summer, America's former pastime, actually. It does a decent job of holding the public's interest for a moment in October in their World Series. That is, until The maniacal rivalries of college football and the Kraken known as the NFL are already up and running in full steam ahead. I don't think anybody could catch them at that point. It's not even close. So here are a few examples of the NFL's monstrous numbers. The full numbers for 2022 will come out pretty soon, but they expect them to be very similar to what just took place in 2021. So in 2021, the NFL experienced its largest television viewing of all time. We're looking at about 17.1 million was the average viewer per NFL game. The NFL ranked as 48 of the top 50 television shows that year, as well as 91 of the top 100 television shows for the regular season. That's just the regular season. That accounted for the NFL more than 370 billion minutes of football being consumed throughout the season. Wrap your mind around those numbers for a second. Hearts and minds. So just as New Year's Eve and New Year's Eve Day celebrations kick off each new year with a bang, so too are the 4 weekends beginning with Selection Sunday in March until a champion is crowned in the men's college basketball's annual March Madness tournament. And just as the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas can be as frenzied as it is joyous, when college football's bowl season wraps up, the NFL heads into the meat of its schedule. And now you're going to see some crazy stuff take place. The vast majority of adults in the country, they seem to leverage all these sick days and somehow find extra room on already overdrawn credit cards for mandatory snacks and some sipping sauce, even if their favorite team is not represented in the final big game of the season. Sounds like holiday celebrations to me. Holidays that form a new kind of calendar that will easily sway hearts and minds to focus more of their eyeballs on screens, which in turn naturally will cause pocketbooks to follow. A new nationally observed calendar purely based on our season of sports.